Colorado Territory, 1872. The mountains stood like sentinels against a blood-orange sunset as Adam Yates guided his horse along the narrow trail leading to Silverdale. At 25, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen more of life's harshness than most twice his age. His lean frame spoke of long days in the saddle, his tanned skin weathered by sun and wind, yet his clean-shaven face retained a youthful handsomeness that belied the weariness in his eyes. Adam had learned early that the frontier demanded a solitary existence. A man alone is a man alive. His father had told him before outlaws took him during a cattle drive when Adam was just 14. He'd lived by those words ever since, convinced that attachments only gave life more ways to break a man. The silver mines of Silverdale offered work, nothing more. He wanted no friends, no connections, just honest pay and the freedom to move on when the restlessness took him again. The town materialized from the gathering dusk, a clutch of wooden buildings clinging to the mountainside like desperate men to false hope. Adam noted the usual frontier establishments: general store, assay office, a church with a listing steeple, and the inevitable saloon where lonely men drowned memories in whiskey. He'd seen 100 such towns. They all looked the same after a while, temporary structures housing temporary lives. Might as well check in at the boarding house, he muttered to his horse, a dappled gray named Ghost. The animal snorted in agreement as they approached a 2-story clapboard building with a sign reading Crawford Boarding House. A woman swept the porch with fierce determination, her movements quick and efficient. When she looked up, Adam felt an unfamiliar jolt. At 22, Josephine Crawford possessed the kind of beauty that seemed out of place in such rough surroundings. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical knot, though wayward tendrils escaped to frame a face of striking symmetry. She wore a simple blue calico dress, its modest cut doing little to disguise her graceful figure. But it was her eyes that caught him, deep amber, alert, and assessing him with undisguised wariness. "You looking for a room?" she asked, her voice carrying an unexpected softness despite the directness of her question. "Yes, ma'am. Just rode in. Heading to the mine office tomorrow." She nodded once. $3 a week, includes breakfast and supper. No drinking, no fighting, no women in the rooms. "Won't be a problem," Adam replied, dismounting and gathering his saddlebags. "Stables are around back." She pointed with the broom. "I'm Josephine Crawford. This is my house." "Adam Yates," he replied, touching the brim of his hat. "Appreciate the lodging, Miss Crawford." Her lips tightened slightly. "Mrs. Crawford," she corrected. Adam glanced instinctively at her left hand, noting no ring. She caught his look. "Widow," she explained curtly. 2 years now." "My apologies," he said, feeling foolish for his assumption. She shrugged, the motion containing a lifetime of resignation. "No need. Rooms at the top of the stairs, first door on the left. Supper's at 6 sharp." As Adam settled Ghost in the stable, he reflected on the young widow. Too young to have already lost a husband to the frontier's merciless demands. Yet there she was, running a business alone in a mining town where women were scarce and dangers plentiful. He silently reaffirmed his commitment to solitude. Life took everything eventually, better not to have anything worth taking. Adam quickly established a routine in Silverdale. Days spent deep in the silver mine, nights in his sparse room at the boarding house. He spoke little at mealtimes, observing rather than participating in the conversations among the other boarders, mostly miners and a traveling salesman who spoke too loudly about everything. Josephine ran her house with quiet efficiency, serving hearty meals, maintaining cleanliness, and enforcing her rules without exception. 2 rowdy miners had been evicted his second week for smuggling in a bottle of whiskey. Adam noticed how the other men respected her, not just for her looks, though they certainly appreciated those, but for her fair dealing and strong will. She remained an enigma. At times, he caught glimpses of a different woman beneath the practical exterior, a flash of humor in her eyes when the salesman told an outlandish tale, a moment of wistful longing when she gazed at the mountains beyond the town. These glimpses intrigued him more than he cared to admit. It was an early spring thunderstorm that disrupted Adam's careful distance. Lightning had struck a stand of pines near town, sparking a fire that threatened to spread to the outlying buildings. Every able-bodied man was called to help form a bucket brigade. For hours they battled the flames while thunder rolled overhead and rain came in sporadic, insufficient bursts. Adam found himself working alongside Josephine, who refused to stay safely inside while her town was threatened. Her hair had come loose from its pins, cascading down her back as she passed buckets with strength that belied her slender frame. Soot streaked her face, and determination set her jaw. When a burning branch crashed down toward her, Adam moved without thinking, pulling her out of harm's way and shielding her with his body. For a moment, they stood pressed together, her amber eyes wide with surprise, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. "Thank you," she said breathlessly. "Just being careful," he replied, stepping back awkwardly. "Fire's unpredictable." "So are people," she countered, a strange look crossing her features before she turned back to the bucket line. By dawn, they had contained the fire. Exhausted townspeople dragged themselves home, faces blackened, clothes drenched from both rain and sweat. Adam found Josephine sitting alone on her porch steps, staring at the smoldering remains of the pine stand. "Should get some rest," he suggested, stopping at the bottom step. "In a minute." She looked up at him, fatigue evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. "You could have been badly hurt, pulling me away from that branch." He shrugged. "Would have done it for anyone." "Would you?" she asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "You keep yourself apart, Mr. Yates. I've watched you. You take your meals at the corner table, always with your back to the wall and your eyes on the door. You speak when spoken to but offer nothing of yourself. You're a man who doesn't want connections." Her perception unsettled him. "Connections complicate things." "They do," she agreed. "My husband thought like you. James was a loner who surprised himself by falling in love. He told me once that loving someone on the frontier was a fool's gamble. Then he died in a mine collapse trying to earn enough for us to move east." Her voice caught slightly. "I called him a fool for loving me enough to die for our future." Adam didn't know what to say, so he remained silent. "The frontier takes," she continued. "It takes and takes until there's nothing left but bare survival. I told myself I'd never be so foolish as to care for someone again. Yet here I am, running a boarding house instead of leaving because this town was our dream. Perhaps I'm the bigger fool." "You're one of the strongest people I've met," Adam said quietly. "There's nothing foolish in that." She studied him, her amber eyes piercing. "We're both hiding, Mr. Yates. Me behind my rules and routines, you behind your solitude. I wonder which of us is more afraid." With that challenge lingering between them, she stood and disappeared into the house, leaving Adam to consider her words long into the morning. May brought warming days and the greening of the mountainsides. Adam found himself looking forward to mealtimes at the boarding house, though he still maintained his corner position. Josephine had begun placing wildflowers in small jars on the tables, a touch of beauty amid the utilitarian surroundings that seemed to reflect something awakening within her. Their interactions remained polite, but had acquired an undercurrent of awareness. Sometimes their hands would brush as she served his plate, and neither would acknowledge the momentary contact. Other times, he would find her watching him with an inscrutable expression that made his chest tighten inexplicably. The catalyst came when Adam intervened in a confrontation at the general store. Josephine had been gathering supplies when three miners, newcomers to town with more bravado than sense, began making increasingly crude comments about what a lonely widow might need besides groceries. Adam stepped between them, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable warning. "The lady deserves respect." The largest of the three sneered. "You her new husband, friend? I'm the man suggesting you move along before this gets unpleasant." Something in Adam's steady gaze, perhaps the absolute certainty that he would back his words with action, convinced them to retreat, muttering insults as they left. Josephine finished her purchases in silence. Outside, she finally spoke. "I don't need a protector, Mr. Yates. I've handled worse than those fools." "Never thought you needed protection," he replied. "But sometimes it's easier to stand together." She looked at him sharply. That's quite a statement from a man dedicated to standing alone. He found himself smiling slightly. "Maybe I'm reconsidering some things." That evening, Adam was splitting firewood behind the boarding house when Josephine appeared with a glass of water. "Thought you might be thirsty," she offered, holding it out. He accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of his sweaty shirt and disheveled appearance. "Thank you. I never properly thanked you for earlier," she said, watching as he drank. While I meant what I said about handling myself, it was nice not to have to. Adam set down the glass. You shouldn't have to face that kind of disrespect. The world isn't much concerned with should or shouldn't, especially out here. She gestured to the surrounding mountains. We make our own rules in the spaces between civilization. Is that why you stay? He asked. To make your own rules? Her expression softened. I stay because despite everything, this still feels like home. James and I had plans for a life here. When he died, I could have gone back east to my family, but that would have meant his dreams died too. She paused. What about you? What keeps you moving from town to town? The question struck closer than he expected. Never found a reason to stay anywhere, I suppose. And what would constitute a reason? Her amber eyes held his steadily. I don't rightly know, he admitted. Never looked for one. Perhaps that's why you've never found it. With that observation, she turned and walked back to the house, leaving Adam to wonder if he'd been running from something rather than toward anything all these years. The invitation to accompany her to Sunday services came unexpectedly. It's not required, Josephine assured him. But Reverend Thomas gives a mercifully short sermon, and there's usually a decent community dinner after. Adam hesitated. Church meant community, and community meant connections he'd spent years avoiding. But looking at Josephine's expectant expression, he found himself nodding. I'll need to dust off my good shirt. The small church was filled with familiar faces, miners from the boarding house, the talkative salesman, shopkeepers from town. Adam felt conspicuous sitting beside Josephine in the pew, aware of curious glances and subtle nods exchanged among the congregation. Reverend Thomas, a practical man with weathered hands that spoke of work beyond the pulpit, delivered a sermon about finding strength in unexpected places. The frontier tests us, he proclaimed. It strips away pretense and reveals our true character. But it also offers opportunities for grace that we might never find in more comfortable surroundings. Adam found himself listening intently, recognizing truth in the words. Beside him, Josephine sat with her hands folded, her profile composed, but her eyes reflecting deeper thoughts. The community dinner afterward was held in a cleared field behind the church. Long tables groaned with contributed dishes, fried chicken, cornbread, preserved fruits opened from precious home stores. Adam had forgotten how it felt to be part of such gatherings, the simple pleasure of shared food and conversation. As they walked back toward the boarding house in the golden afternoon light, Josephine looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Thank you for coming, she said. I usually attend alone. I enjoyed it more than I expected, he admitted. Been a long time since I sat in a church pew. May I ask why you've avoided it? He considered deflecting, but found himself answering honestly. After my father died, I stopped believing in much of anything worth praying about. Seemed pointless to ask for protection from a God who lets good men die while bad ones prosper. She nodded thoughtfully. I understand that feeling. When James died, I was furious at God, at the mine owners, at James himself for leaving me. But eventually, I realized that anger was just another way of staying connected to what I'd lost. And now I accept that life here contains both beauty and brutality in equal measure. We can't have one without risking the other. She glanced at him. Is that why you avoid connections? Fear of the brutality that might follow the beauty. The question pierced him with its accuracy. When you've seen enough people not come home, you learn that caring is just setting yourself up for loss. Josephine stopped walking, turning to face him fully. That's existing, Adam, not living. And I think you know the difference. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something about hearing it in her voice made his carefully constructed walls feel suddenly flimsy. Maybe I do, he acknowledged. Doesn't make changing easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, she replied, her amber eyes holding his with an intensity that made his breath catch. Especially not out here. June brought scorching heat that baked the mountainsides and made the mine shafts unbearable by midday. Work slowed as men took shifts to avoid the worst of the temperatures. With his afternoons suddenly free, Adam found himself helping Josephine with repairs around the boarding house, fixing loose boards on the porch, reinforcing shutters, patching the stable roof. They fell into an easy rhythm of work, conversation flowing more naturally with each passing day. He learned that she had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher. She'd met James Crawford when he came east seeking investors for mining ventures. Against her family's wishes, she'd married him at 19 and followed him west, entranced by his visions of building a life in the new territories. I was naive, she admitted as they painted the porch railing. I imagined adventure and romance, not chilblains and loneliness. But I never regretted coming. Even after losing James, I found strengths in myself I never knew existed. You've built something impressive here, Adam told her sincerely. She smiled, a streak of white paint adorning her cheek. It's not the life I imagined, but it's mine. What about you? What did young Adam Yates dream of becoming? He chuckled. Believe it or not, I wanted to be a doctor. Used to patch up injured animals on our farm. My mother encouraged it, said I had gentle hands. The memory surfaced unexpectedly, almost painful in its clarity. What happened to that dream? Reality, he said simply. After Pa died, there was no money for schooling. Ma followed a year later, influenza. I was 17 with a mortgaged farm and no prospects. Sold everything, paid off the debts, and headed west with what little remained. Josephine's brush stilled. I'm sorry, that's a heavy burden for anyone, let alone someone so young. It was a long time ago. Some losses never feel long ago, she observed quietly. They stay present, shaping everything that follows. Their eyes met in understanding, and Adam realized she was the first person in years who truly saw him. Not just the capable cowboy and miner, but the boy who had lost his path, the man who had replaced dreams with survival. As summer deepened, so did their connection. They began taking evening walks through town or along the safer trails near the settlement. Josephine showed him her favorite viewpoint, a rocky outcropping that provided a panoramic vista of the valley. They would sit in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the world in impossible colors. I come here to remember why I stay, she told him one evening as they watched golden light transform the landscape. When the boarding house feels too confining or the town too small, this reminds me of the vastness that's still out there. It's something to behold, Adam agreed, though he found his gaze drawn more to her profile than the scenery. The western light caught her chestnut hair, illuminating hidden auburn highlights. Josephine, she turned to him, something vulnerable in her expression. Yes, the words he wanted to say caught in his throat, too new, too frightening in their implications. Instead, he reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. She didn't pull away, her amber eyes searching his. I think I'm finding a reason to stay, he said finally. Adam, there was warning in her voice, but also longing. We both know the risks. Yes, he acknowledged. We do. She placed her hand over his, holding it against her cheek for a moment before gently removing it. I buried one man I loved. I swore never to put myself in that position again. I understand, he said, though disappointment coursed through him. Friendship is more than I expected to find here anyway. Josephine looked at him for a long moment. Is friendship truly all you're feeling? The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. No, he admitted. It isn't. Then we have a problem, she said softly. Because I'm feeling far more than friendship too, and it terrifies me. The confession hung between them as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. July brought both celebration and disaster to Silverdale. Independence Day was marked with a town picnic, music from a hastily assembled band of miners with instruments, and even a few modest fireworks brought in by the traveling salesman. Adam and Josephine attended together, their undefined relationship now the subject of gentle gossip throughout the settlement. They were dancing to a somewhat uneven rendition of a Virginia reel when the first shouts of alarm came. Smoke was rising from the entrance to the main mine shaft, not the normal dust of operations but thick, black plumes that signaled serious trouble. The celebration dissolved into chaos as miners raced toward the shaft. Though it was a holiday, a skeleton crew had been working to meet production quotas. Adam joined the rescue effort without hesitation, his earlier medical interests driving him forward while his mind calculated the dangers: fire, cave-ins, the deadly gases that could fill enclosed spaces. Adam, wait. Josephine caught his arm as he prepared to enter the shaft with the rescue team. Her face was pale but composed. Be careful, please. He squeezed her hand. I will. The scene underground was nightmarish, smoke-filled tunnels illuminated only by flickering lanterns, the groans of injured men echoing against stone walls. A support beam had collapsed, trapping several miners behind a partial cave-in. The rescue team worked feverishly, passing buckets of debris backward while trying to shore up the unstable ceiling. For hours they labored, bringing out injured men one by one. Adam's shirt was soaked with sweat and grime, his lungs burning from the smoke, but he refused to leave while others remained trapped. As they reached the last section, a new rumble shuddered through the tunnel. "It's coming down," someone shouted. "Everyone out." Adam saw a fallen miner just beyond the weakening support beams, young Tommy Jenkins, barely 18 and supporting his widowed mother. Without thinking, he lunged forward, grabbing Tommy's collar and dragging him towards safety as the tunnel collapsed behind them. They emerged into daylight to cheers from the assembled crowd. Adam helped pass Tommy to the makeshift medical station before his legs gave way, and he sat heavily on the ground, coughing and gasping for clean air. Suddenly Josephine was kneeling beside him, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "You reckless, foolish man," she said, her voice breaking as she pressed a water canteen to his lips. "Had to help," he managed between coughs. "You could have been killed," she said fiercely. She stopped abruptly. "Just like James," he finished for her, understanding filling him. "But I wasn't." She helped him to his feet, supporting him as they walked slowly back to the boarding house. Inside her small private sitting room, she cleaned the cuts on his face with gentle hands that belied the turmoil in her eyes. "Watching you go into that mine," she said finally. "It brought everything back. The waiting, the fear, the helplessness." "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't," she interrupted. "You acted from instinct, just as James did. He died trying to save 2 trapped men during a collapse." Her hand stilled. "That's the kind of man he was. The kind of man you are." Adam caught her wrist gently. "Josephine, look at me." When she raised her eyes to his, he continued. "I came back. This time," she whispered. "I can't promise there won't be dangers," he acknowledged. "Not here, not anywhere on the frontier. But I can promise that I will always do everything in my power to return to you." She shook her head, tears threatening again. "Don't make promises the wilderness might not let you keep." "Then let me make one I know I can keep," he said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "I love you, Josephine Crawford. Whether you can accept that or not, whether you can return it or not, it's the truth. And if loving you makes me a fool in a dangerous land, then so be it." She stared at him, emotions warring on her face. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "You're a fool for loving me, Adam Yates. A complete and utter fool." His heart sank, but before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a desperate, longing kiss that contained both surrender and claim. When she pulled back, her amber eyes were clear despite the tears on her cheeks. "Then I'm the happiest fool alive," he whispered, drawing her back into his arms. August brought change to Silverdale and to Adam's life. The mine disaster had claimed 3 lives and injured 15 others, but it had also exposed dangerous negligence by the Eastern owners. When they refused to improve conditions, many miners, including Adam, walked out in protest. With his mining work suspended, Adam found himself at a crossroads. Josephine suggested he consider what he really wanted now that his heart was no longer set on perpetual movement. "The livery stable's for sale," she mentioned one evening as they sat on her porch. "Old Fletcher's going back east to live with his daughter. Says his joints can't take another Colorado winter." Adam considered the idea. He'd always had a way with horses, and the stable was a solid business in a growing town. "It would mean putting down roots," he said, testing the notion aloud. Josephine's hand found his. "Is that still so frightening?" "No," he realized with some surprise. "It isn't." Within a week, Adam had negotiated terms with Fletcher and found himself the owner of Silverdale's only livery stable and blacksmith shop. The work suited him: honest physical labor, the satisfaction of solving problems, and the company of horses who responded to his gentle handling. Business was steady as miners still needed transportation, and the stage line required regular team changes. His relationship with Josephine blossomed in the open now. They no longer pretended their evening walks were casual, or that his frequent dinners in her private quarters were merely neighborly. The town accepted them as a couple with the matter-of-fact approval of a community that had seen too much hardship to begrudge anyone happiness. Yet a shadow lingered in their joy. Josephine's past loss made her hesitant to fully embrace their future, while Adam sometimes caught himself scanning horizons, old instincts warning against comfort. They circled each other's deepest fears, drawing closer while maintaining final, thin barriers. The reckoning came with autumn's first chill. A letter arrived for Josephine, the spidery handwriting of her elderly father summoning her back to Boston. Her mother was gravely ill, perhaps with only weeks to live. "I have to go," she said, the letter trembling in her hand as she stood in Adam's newly built cabin adjacent to the livery. "She never approved of my marriage or my life here, but she's still my mother." "Of course you must go," Adam agreed, though dread pooled in his stomach. "When will you leave?" "The eastbound stage comes tomorrow." She looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know how long I'll be gone." The unspoken question hung between them. Would she return at all? Back in Boston, surrounded by civilization and family, would she remember why she had chosen the hardships of frontier life? Adam took her hands in his. "Josephine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, her expression solemn. "Do you want to come back?" She looked startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is Silverdale truly your home now? Or has it just been a place you stayed because it was James's dream? Because if Boston calls to you, if that's where your heart truly belongs, I need to know." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've been so focused on surviving here, on keeping his memory alive, that I haven't let myself consider alternatives." The honesty hurt, but Adam appreciated it. "Then perhaps this trip is what you need, to see your old life again with new eyes." "What about us?" she asked, her voice small. Adam took a deep breath. "I love you enough to want your happiness, even if that means losing you." She pressed herself against him, her tears soaking his shirt. "I don't want to lose what we've found, but I'm afraid, Adam. Afraid of loving completely again, afraid of what might happen if I let myself belong entirely to this life, to you." He held her close, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. "I'll be here," he promised. "Whatever you decide, I'll understand." The next morning, he accompanied her to the stage depot. She carried one valise and wore her best dress, a deep burgundy traveling outfit that emphasized her beauty and reminded him painfully of how well she would fit into Eastern society. "All right," she promised as the stage approached. "I'll be waiting for your letters," he replied, trying to sound confident rather than bereft. Their goodbye kiss held desperation, longing, and too many unresolved questions. As the stage pulled away, Adam stood in the swirling dust, a familiar emptiness expanding inside him. The protective instinct to detach, to prepare for abandonment, rose strongly. But as he turned back toward town, toward his stable and the life he was building, Adam made a conscious decision to resist that old impulse. Running had never healed anything. This time, he would stay and face whatever came, even if it meant facing it alone. Autumn painted the mountains in fiery colors as Josephine's letters arrived regularly from Boston. She wrote of her mother's declining health, of reconnecting with her father and brothers, of the strange feeling of being both familiar with and alienated from her former world. "Boston feels like a memory rather than a place," she wrote. "The comforts are undeniable: hot water on demand, theaters, proper sidewalks without mud. Yet I find myself missing the mountains terribly, missing you even more." Adam read each letter until the pages threatened to wear thin, searching for clues to her ultimate decision. He threw himself into his work, expanding the stable, taking on an apprentice to help with the blacksmithing, building a reputation for fair dealing and quality craftsmanship. In late October, devastating news arrived. Josephine's mother had died, and family obligations would keep her in Boston through the winter. The mountain passes would likely be snowbound before she could return, even if she left immediately. "I ask for your patience," her letter concluded, "and for your understanding that my absence is not a reflection of my feelings for you, which grow only stronger with distance." Adam folded the letter carefully and placed it with the others in a carved wooden box he'd made to hold her correspondence. Winter in Silverdale without Josephine stretched before him like an endless plain. He had survived far worse, he reminded himself, yet the knowledge brought little comfort. November brought the first heavy snowfall. Adam added a second story to his cabin during the shorter days, imagining a proper home rather than the bachelor quarters he'd initially built. If Josephine returned in spring, when, not if, he corrected himself. He wanted to offer her more than a frontier shack. It was during the year's final month that the stranger arrived in Silverdale. The stage was running irregularly due to weather, and passengers were rare. The tall, well-dressed man who stepped down onto the snowy street stood out immediately, his Eastern clothes and imperious manner marking him as distinctly out of place. Adam was shoeing a horse when the man entered the stable, stamping snow from expensive boots. "I'm looking for Mrs. Josephine Crawford," he announced without preamble. Adam straightened, studying the visitor with instinctive wariness. "She's not in Silverdale at present. I'm Adam Yates, the livery owner. Can I help you?" The man's expression registered disappointment, followed by calculation. "Alexander Crawford, James's brother. I've come from San Francisco regarding family matters." Adam's surprise must have shown on his face. In all their conversations, Josephine had never mentioned a brother-in-law, certainly not one living relatively nearby in California. "I wasn't aware James had family out west," he said carefully. Crawford's smile didn't reach his eyes. "James and I had a complicated relationship. Business disagreements, primarily. I've been abroad for several years and only recently learned of his death." He glanced around the stable with poorly disguised disdain. "When will Mrs. Crawford return?" "Spring, most likely," Adam replied, increasingly uneasy about the man's manner. "She's in Boston with her family." "I see." Crawford nodded thoughtfully. "Well, this is unfortunate timing. I had hoped to settle matters in person." He reached into his coat and withdrew an official-looking document. "Perhaps you could ensure she receives this when she returns. It concerns property that rightfully belongs to the Crawford family." Adam accepted the envelope reluctantly. "I'll see that she gets it." "Excellent." Crawford turned to leave, then paused. "May I ask your relationship to my late brother's wife?" The question carried an undercurrent of challenge that raised Adam's hackles. "We're close friends. I look after her interests while she's away." Crawford's eyebrows rose slightly. "How gallant." "Good day, Mr. Yates." After the man departed, Adam stared at the envelope, tempted to open it despite the impropriety. Something about Crawford's manner suggested threat rather than family business. Eventually, he placed it in his desk drawer, resolving to mention it in his next letter to Josephine. Her reply came faster than expected, carried by a determined postal rider who braved December storms to deliver mail before Christmas. "I've never met Alexander Crawford," she wrote, her normally neat handwriting showing signs of agitation. "James spoke of a brother once or twice, always with regret over some falling out. He mentioned that Alexander had tried to claim family mining interests that James had rightfully purchased. Please be cautious, Adam. I cannot imagine any legitimate business brings him to Silverdale after all this time." The warning heightened Adam's concerns. He began asking subtle questions around town, learning that Crawford had taken a room at the hotel rather than departing as he'd implied. The man had been making inquiries about the boarding house, about Josephine's business, and about the original Crawford mining claims. 2 days before Christmas, Adam decided to confront him directly. He found Crawford in the hotel dining room, leisurely enjoying a breakfast while snow fell heavily outside. "Mr. Crawford," Adam said, remaining standing beside the table, "I believe we have matters to discuss." The man gestured to the empty chair with exaggerated courtesy. "Please join me, Mr. Yates. I was hoping we might have a further conversation." Adam sat, declining the offered coffee. "Josephine has no knowledge of any property claims you might have. Whatever business brought you here, I suggest you state it plainly." Crawford's pleasant expression hardened slightly. "Direct, aren't you? Very well. My brother died owning substantial mining interests in this area. Interests that should have reverted to me as his only living male relative. Instead, I find his widow has retained control of everything, including property that was never rightfully his to begin with." "James Crawford died in a mine collapse trying to save others," Adam said, anger rising at the man's callous attitude. "His wife built a life here through hard work and determination. Whatever claims you think you have would be better addressed through proper legal channels, not by appearing unannounced while she's across the country. Rest assured, my claims are entirely legal." Crawford's smile returned, colder than before. "The documents I've provided outline everything. James acquired our family's original stakes through, let's call it misrepresentation. I merely seek to rectify that situation. And if Josephine disputes your claims, Crawford shrugged elegantly. Then things might become unpleasant. Mining towns have such unfortunate accidents. Fires, structural failures. It would be a shame if her charming boarding house suffered some misfortune during her absence. The thinly veiled threat made Adam's blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Crawford. Merely an observation about frontier hazards. Crawford sipped his coffee calmly. I'm prepared to be generous, given the circumstances. The boarding house itself isn't of interest to me. Only the mining claims and the parcel along Silver Creek. Adam frowned. The creek property was undeveloped land Josephine had often mentioned as having special meaning. The place where she and James had planned to build their permanent home someday. That land has no mining potential, Adam said, suspicion growing. Perhaps not. Crawford's eyes gleamed. But it does control water access to the Eastern Valley, water that will be quite valuable as Silverdale expands. James always did have an eye for long-term investments, even if he lacked the vision to capitalize on them properly. The pieces fell into place. Crawford hadn't come for family justice but for profit, attempting to seize valuable assets while Josephine was conveniently absent. I'll be discussing this with Josephine, Adam said, rising from the table. In the meantime, I suggest you refrain from making any moves against her property. Crawford looked untroubled by the warning. By all means, consult with the widow. But remember, Mr. Yates, winter is long, and Silverdale is very isolated until spring. Christmas came to Silverdale with a community gathering at the church. Despite the festive atmosphere, Adam remained vigilant, aware of Crawford watching from the periphery of every event. The man had begun ingratiating himself with local business owners and miners, spinning tales about his brother's alleged misdeeds and his own rightful claims. Adam had written urgently to Josephine, explaining the situation in detail. Her response was delayed by worsening weather that made mail delivery sporadic at best. When her letter finally arrived in early January, her instructions were clear. I have telegraphed our lawyer in Denver. He will send documentation proving James legally purchased all Crawford family interests with full documentation and witnesses. The Silver Creek property was never part of those holdings. It was purchased separately with money from my dowry. Under no circumstances should you allow Alexander to intimidate anyone into actions before spring. I am making arrangements to return as soon as mountain passes permit travel. Armed with this knowledge, Adam confronted Crawford again, this time at the assayer's office where the man had been reviewing old claim records. Your claims won't stand legal scrutiny, Adam informed him without preamble. Josephine has documentation proving everything was properly purchased and registered. You're wasting your time. Crawford's composure slipped momentarily, revealing a flash of genuine anger. You seem unusually invested in another man's widow, Yates. One might question your motivations. My motivations are irrelevant, Adam replied evenly. The legal facts are what matter. Legal facts have a way of becoming flexible in places this remote, Crawford countered, his voice hardening. Especially when competing interpretations arise. Documents can be lost. Records damaged. Memories altered. Not this time, Adam assured him. Josephine's lawyer in Denver has copies of everything. Whatever scheme you're planning won't work. Crawford studied him for a moment, then smiled thinly. We shall see. Winter is young yet, and I find myself quite comfortable in Silverdale. Perhaps I'll stay until my dear sister-in-law returns. Family reunions can be so illuminating. The implied threat lingered as Crawford brushed past. Adam watched him go, increasingly certain that the man wouldn't be deterred by legal obstacles. People like Alexander Crawford saw the frontier as a place where power and intimidation could override justice, and too often, they were right. That night, Adam sat before his fireplace, rereading Josephine's letters and contemplating his next move. He had promised to protect her interests, but Crawford's persistence suggested escalation was inevitable. The man hadn't come this far to leave empty-handed. His reflections were interrupted by urgent pounding on his door. Opening it revealed Tommy Jenkins, the young miner Adam had rescued months earlier, his face flushed with cold and exertion. Mr. Yates, you need to come quick. There's smoke coming from the boarding house. Adam grabbed his coat and ran through the snowy streets, dread propelling him forward. From 2 blocks away, he could see orange flames licking at the rear of the building where the kitchen was located. A small crowd had already gathered, forming a bucket brigade from the town pump. For hours they fought the blaze, managing to contain it to the kitchen and rear rooms. By dawn, the danger had passed, leaving the main structure intact but the rear severely damaged. Exhausted, covered in soot, Adam surveyed the scene with grim certainty about its cause. His suspicions were confirmed when he found a kerosene-soaked rag beneath the back porch, too deliberate to be accidental, too hidden to be noticed without careful search. "Crawford," he muttered, fury building inside him. He found the man breakfasting calmly at the hotel again, as if nothing had occurred. "Terrible business, that fire," Crawford commented before Adam could speak. "So fortunate, it was discovered before the entire building was lost. These frontier structures are so vulnerable." Adam leaned across the table, voice low to avoid being overheard. "I found evidence of arson. If I take it to Sheriff Miller, he'll have questions for you." Crawford appeared unperturbed. "Evidence can be so ambiguous, Mr. Yates. Perhaps a disgruntled former boarder? Or simple carelessness with heating during these cold nights. I'm certain I was right here in my room when the unfortunate incident occurred. Several witnesses can confirm it." "We both know what you did," Adam hissed. "What I did," Crawford replied calmly, "was demonstrate the precarious nature of Mrs. Crawford's position. The boarding house can be repaired. Next time, perhaps the damage will be more comprehensive. Unless, of course, she sees reason about those property claims." Adam straightened, restraining himself from the violence his instincts demanded. "This isn't over." "Indeed not," Crawford agreed pleasantly. "It's barely begun." January deepened into February with bone-chilling cold that kept most of Silverdale's residents indoors. Adam organized repairs to the boarding house, working alongside volunteers during daylight hours when temperatures permitted. The town had rallied around the beloved establishment, donating materials and labor to restore what had been damaged. Meanwhile, Adam had begun quietly gathering information about Alexander Crawford, sending inquiries to contacts in San Francisco and Denver. The responses painted a troubling picture. Crawford had left significant debts in California, was facing possible fraud charges, and had a reputation for unscrupulous business dealings throughout the West. Most concerning was the revelation that he had arrived in Silverdale with 2 hired men who had taken rooms in the smaller boarding house at the edge of town. Their rough appearance and tendency to watch Adam's movements suggested they weren't simply traveling companions. Adam took precautions, never going unarmed and varying his routines. He slept lightly, a loaded rifle within reach. The confrontation he anticipated came sooner than expected. Returning to his cabin after evening rounds at the stable, Adam sensed the ambush moments before it materialized from the shadows between buildings. 3 figures stepped into his path, Crawford flanked by 2 burly men with hands resting on holstered pistols. "Mr. Yates," Crawford greeted him with mock cordiality. "I believe it's time we reached an understanding." Adam assessed the situation quickly. The street was deserted in the bitter evening cold, no witnesses to whatever happened next. "I believe I understood you perfectly after the fire." Crawford smiled thinly. "Yet you persist in obstructing legitimate business. My patience wanes." He gestured to his companions. "These gentlemen have suggested more direct methods of resolution." 3 against 1, Adam observed. "Those seem like odds a coward would arrange." The intended provocation worked. One of the hired men stepped forward angrily, hand moving to his gun. "Watch your mouth." Crawford held up a restraining hand. "We're businessmen having a discussion, Jenkins. No need for unpleasantness yet." He focused on Adam again. "I require your signature on certain documents, a statement that, as Mrs. Crawford's representative, you acknowledge the validity of my claims pending her return. A simple formality to allow preliminary work to begin. And if I refuse, then my associates will escort you to a more private location where we might persuade you of the wisdom of cooperation." Crawford's veneer of civilization had thinned, revealing the threat beneath. Few would question another disappearance in winter. Men wander into snowstorms, fall down mine shafts. Adam had faced similar threats before, but never with so much at stake. In his younger days, he would have either fought or fled, solitary survival being his only concern. Now, with roots in Silverdale and Josephine's trust to honor, neither option satisfied. "I'll need time to consider," he said, playing for advantage. Crawford's expression showed skepticism. Until tomorrow morning. Meet me at the assayer's office at 9 with your decision. He stepped aside, allowing Adam to pass. Choose wisely, Mr. Yates. Even the noblest sentiments provide cold comfort in a shallow grave. Adam walked past without responding, aware of their eyes following him until he reached his cabin. Inside, he moved quickly, gathering essentials and formulating a plan. Crawford had forced the situation to crisis, but perhaps that created opportunity as well as danger. Before dawn, Adam visited Sheriff Miller, explaining the situation and his intentions. The aging lawman, while sympathetic, offered limited hope. I can't arrest a man for making implied threats, Yates. Not without witnesses or evidence. He sighed, rubbing his graying mustache. And these hired toughs haven't broken any laws I can prove. I understand, Adam replied. I'm not asking for arrests, just awareness. If things go wrong today, you'll know where to start looking. Miller nodded grimly. Be careful, son. Men like Crawford, they don't see the frontier as a place to build, only to take. At precisely 9, Adam entered the assayer's office where Crawford waited, his hired men positioned near the door. The small room normally used for weighing or samples and recording claims felt unnaturally quiet, the regular assayer conspicuously absent. Have you come to your senses? Crawford inquired, indicating papers spread on the counter. I've come to make a counteroffer, Adam replied steadily. You'll withdraw all claims against Josephine Crawford's property, leave Silverdale immediately, and never return. Crawford's laugh held genuine amusement. Based on what leverage, exactly? You seem to misunderstand your position. Based on these, Adam removed folded papers from his coat. Telegrams from San Francisco confirming your outstanding warrants for fraud. Witness statements about the boarding house fire. And this, he produced a final document. A letter from James Crawford to Josephine, dated a week before his death, explicitly warning her about your potential claims and affirming that all properties were legally purchased with full documentation. The confidence in Crawford's expression flickered. Easily falsified. No court. We're not in court, Adam interrupted. We're in a mining town in winter, where justice sometimes takes more immediate forms. He met Crawford's gaze unflinchingly. The sheriff now has copies of everything. So do 3 other trusted citizens. If anything happens to me, these go to Denver with the next mail rider. The hired men shifted uncomfortably, sensing the changing dynamic. Crawford's face hardened as he realized his miscalculation. You're bluffing, he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Test me, Adam invited quietly. But consider this. I have everything to fight for. What exactly are you risking your life for? Property that was never rightfully yours? Revenge against a dead brother? Is any of it worth dying in a frontier town far from anywhere that would remember your name? A tense silence filled the room as Crawford weighed his options. Finally, he gathered the papers from the counter with controlled movements. This isn't finished. Yes, Adam contradicted him. It is. The eastbound stage leaves at noon. I've already arranged your passage. Your men can accompany you or face Sheriff Miller regarding the boarding house fire. Either way, your business in Silverdale is concluded. The hired toughs exchanged glances, clearly reassessing their commitment to Crawford's cause. One muttered something to the other, and both backed toward the door. Crawford's face flushed with fury and humiliation. You've made a serious enemy today, Yates. Better an enemy I can see coming than one who burns buildings in the night. Adam replied evenly. Noon, Mr. Crawford. Don't miss your stage. When Crawford's stage departed that afternoon, the man himself grimly silent in the corner seat, his hired men having already slipped away separately, Adam felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The immediate threat had passed, though he harbored no illusions that Crawford would abandon his schemes entirely. There would be legal challenges ahead, but those could be fought on even ground when Josephine returned. The remaining winter weeks passed in steady work, completing repairs to the boarding house, expanding the livery business, and exchanging increasingly personal letters with Josephine. Her words carried growing certainty about her return, about their future together. Boston feels increasingly foreign to me, she wrote in late February. The comforts I once took for granted now seem excessive. The conversations trivial compared to the genuine struggles and triumphs of frontier life. My family cannot understand why I would choose to return to such primitive conditions. They see only the hardships, not the freedom or the community we've built. As March brought the first hints of spring thaw, a telegram arrived from Denver. Arriving Silverdale March 15th, weather permitting. All my heart, Josephine. Adam read the message repeatedly, allowing himself to fully embrace hope for the first time. He threw himself into final preparations, ensuring the boarding house was fully restored and even improved, completing the second story of his cabin with furnishings ordered from Denver, preparing for whatever future they might build together. On the appointed day, Adam waited at the stage depot with barely contained anticipation. The coach was late, delayed by muddy roads as winter reluctantly released its grip on the mountain passes. When it finally appeared in the distance, lurching along the rutted track into town, he felt a nervous energy he hadn't experienced since youth. The stage rolled to a stop in a spray of spring mud. The door opened, and Josephine emerged, looking both familiar and somehow changed. Her chestnut hair was arranged more simply than the Eastern fashion might dictate, her traveling dress practical rather than ornate. But it was her expression that caught Adam's attention, the clear, certain look of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. For a moment, they simply gazed at each other across the short distance, the months of separation falling away. Then she was in his arms, solid and real, her amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "You came back," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Of course I did," she replied, touching his face as if reassuring herself of his presence. "This is home. You are home." Later, after her bags were settled in the restored boarding house and the initial flurry of welcomes from townspeople had subsided, they walked together to the overlook where they had sat so many times before. The valley spread below them, patches of snow still clinging to shadowed places while green already reclaimed the sunlit slopes. "I heard about Crawford," Josephine said as they settled on their familiar rock. "Your letters told me some, but the stage driver filled in details. He said you stood against him when many would have yielded." Adam shrugged slightly. "I promised to protect your interests." "It was more than that." She turned to face him fully. "You protected our future. The future we might build here together, if you still want that." "I've never wanted anything more," he admitted, taking her hand in his. "These months without you, I realized that all my years of drifting, of avoiding connections, were just fear disguised as freedom. Real freedom is choosing to build something lasting, despite knowing the risks." She smiled, tears gathering in her amber eyes. "I came to the same realization in Boston. I was surrounded by safety and comfort, yet I felt trapped by it. The frontier may be dangerous, but it allows us to become our truest selves." She squeezed his hand. "I don't want to waste any more time being afraid of loving completely, Adam. Life offers no guarantees, east or west. All we can do is choose how fully we live it." "Josephine Crawford," Adam said softly, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a simple gold band, sturdy rather than ornate, practical for a frontier wife, but unmistakably precious. "Will you build that life with me? Will you marry me, knowing all the uncertainties we face?" She looked at the ring, then back to his face with a radiance that outshone the spring sunshine. "You're still a fool for loving me in such a dangerous place," she said, her voice catching. Adam smiled, the certainty in his heart banishing the last shadows of his solitary past. "Then I'm the happiest fool alive," he replied, "and I plan to remain so for all our days." "Yes," she whispered, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. "Yes to all of it. The uncertainty, the danger, the joy. Our love may be foolish by some measures, but it's the truest wisdom I've ever known." As they sealed their promise with a kiss, the last snow on the mountaintops caught the setting sun, turning golden like a blessing on the future they would forge together in the wilderness that had tried and tested them, and ultimately given them the greatest gift of all, the courage to love without reservation in a land that demanded everything and promised nothing except the freedom to try.